does this start? In a couple of minutes.
Yeah, you're live right now.
We are live.
Hi, YouTube.
So hello, YouTube. Thank you for your patience for making sure that all of our streaming is up and running. We're going to get started in just 1 second. I see so many of you here joining us, and we super appreciate it. Awesome.
Good.
We are live across all of our streams, so super excited for all of you joining us here, all of the ways that you're joining us. Seeing some of your comments, seeing a lot of faces, names, not really faces, icons though, really. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Super excited. So I'm here with Jenna Weekland. So for those of you who don't know Jenna, it has occurred to me, she's joined me here now for our last 2 book events. And I assume everyone out there knows Jenna, especially if you're part of the circle, but it occurs to me that we have a lot of new members of the community now who might not know who Jenna is. Jenna and I's paths crossed quite early on my journey on social media. She's a soul who herself has been on her own self-healing journey, has incredible wisdom to share with us all, and has been a member of the team helping me run the Self-Healer Circle for quite some time now. Jenna is also going to be the co-host for our new podcast, The Self-Healer Soundboard, where those of you who have been following along with
Notification, the YouTube has gone down, so just 1 second. You can keep talking.
with all of you, sorry, just getting a tech notification, all things technology back on the back end here. So for those of you who are following along with our book journey, probably by now know, or maybe this is news to you, the first, I think, 14 episodes of our podcast, we're actually going to be offering a master class where we deep dive into each and every chapter of how to do the work. So while today is our last official live book event, we are going to be, like I said, diving into a master class, and Jenna, of course, will be joining me on that. So lots of opportunities to hear all about Jenna and her story, but for now, Jenna is joining me here today to help facilitate the live Q&A. So thank you, Jenna.
Thank you. And hello, everyone. It's nice to see, well, we had comments up a little bit. At least some of your names on here. I'm excited, like Nicole said, to get to know you guys a lot more as we dive into the Self-Healer Soundboard in all of the months and years to come. And today, thank you for joining us for the How to Do the Work live Q&A event. As many of you may have seen on social media, on Instagram particularly, we put out a voicemail number over the last couple of weeks for you to call in and ask your questions in regards to the book. So we have selected a few of those questions for today to chat about, have a conversation, share with you, answer the questions that we think will really relate to most of us on a macro. So our first question is from Michael. Mindful Michael, I think you may be watching. I know you knew your question was going to be on. We're going to have Furkan, our amazing creative director, play the audio of your voicemail, and then we will answer it live.
As soon as the YouTube goes up, we can start questions if you guys.
Awesome.
Oh, awesome.
All right, so it looks like we're back on YouTube. Apologies for that interruption on our stream here. Trying to make sure that we're blasting this to all of our different ways that we know many of our community members are viewing these live events, so that, of course, each and every one of you from wherever you are around the world can hop on. So just getting things coordinated. And in a second or two, we actually were able to save the voicemails. So we're going to have Michael asking his question directly to us in but a minute. So Mindful Michael, yeah, if you're out there listening, I sure hope you are. You are someone who joined our community. I can't even remember how early on, probably about as early on as Jenna. You were kicking around the Self-Healer community.
The beginning.
Michael, you've definitely been around, been supporting on your own journey of self-healing for quite some time now. So it is definitely our honor, and we were super excited to hear when your voicemail came through, and we actually found your question to be very interesting. So we wanted to offer it so that we could give our answer, and interestingly enough, Jenna and I are going to answer in 2 slightly different ways, I believe. So super excited to hear from you directly in just a minute or two. Seeing no sound, can't hear anything.
They can hear you now.
Okay, so I think our sound is back up.
Thank you.
Back up running.
YouTube
Hopefully
went down
everyone
for a
out there
second.
in the Instagram world can hear. We have all this cool technology ability now to play voicemails. Now it's just a matter of coordinating everything and all the different big machines that you guys cannot see that is behind the phones and the camera here. Sometimes tech likes to compete, apparently, with things and words I don't know. So this is why we have a Furcon now who's, thank you, working behind the scenes to make sure that we resolve this. Hopefully those of you who are on Instagram are hearing sound. Thank you, as always, for your patience as we get this up and running.
No sound again. Oh, wow.
Do we have sound on Instagram?
We do have sound on Instagram. Instagram can still hear you.
All right, so good thing that Instagram is still out there hearing us.
Thanks, IG.
We obviously don't have access to the back end of your comments, or else we would be chatting with you guys too as well. The way the phone is pointed, all of you understand the woes of the Instagram world at this point. But of course, we're just trying to increase access for everyone here. Though we're having a bit of a glitch.
Let's see if I can get one. See if I can see comments.
Yeah, see if there's a way that we can. Maybe if that's not running, we can still see if we can hear.
Oh, look, it's us.
There we are. We're watching us. How trippy.
Oh, I can't see your
Technology on
no
technology.
comments.
Okay, they can hear you. I can hear you. We're good.
All right, we are back up and running. Awesome. Okay, rebooting. So in but a second now, for real, Michael's voice will be joining us. Giving us 1 second, and we'll blast him and his words and his question in.
Michael coming up.
All right.
Hey, Nicole, and the Self Healers team. This is Michael from Canada. I'm Mindful Michael on Instagram. My question is short and simple, yet kind of complex. If you had to or could sum up how to do the work into one single word or even a small phrase, what would that be? That's my question. Thanks, guys. Thank you, Nicole. Thank you to your whole team. Keep up the amazing work. Take care. Bye-bye.
Incredible. So thank you, Michael. Essentially, I'm hearing Michael ask if we could sum up the work in a word or in a phrase, what would that be? So first, got to admit, 2 words that came and that popped into my mind when I heard this question are probably words that, for those of you who have been following me, have probably heard me speak consistently ad nauseum. So my 2 words are conscious empowerment. For me, I really believe that embodies what we're doing here, what the work is all about. It's about really tuning in to the choice, mainly, that comes with a practice of conscious empowerment. Really acknowledging that so many of us feel disempowered, we feel stuck, because we don't feel like we have choice. We feel like we're living reactively, as many of us are, living again from that autopilot. So when I consider the work, you'll hear me often talk about how it is an action. It's a process of sorts. And what the process is, again, for me, it's an empowering, a consciousness, so that I can show up as a conscious being in each and every moment, as they definitely shift and change, as we grow, as we age, as our relationships change, as our world changes around us. However, we can still empower ourselves to make choices that are more aligned with who we are now, and again, who we continue to evolve and change to be. So for me, the process of, or the work, the 2 words that come to mind for me are conscious empowerment. What was it that came to mind when you heard this question from Michael, Jenna?
Immediately, the single word that came to mind for me was and is consistency. And I love how we both naturally just went down 2 different paths with this. You're getting great at sharing the stage too. Nicole's always used to being just dead on one person, so this is a practice. It's great. Consistency for me is kind of like the big macro house of everything. So the conscious empowerment that you're talking about, everything, all of the tools in the book, to me, literally live in this house called consistency, and all of these tools are inside of it. And without that consistency, nothing really changes or transforms. So this conscious empowerment, the tools that the book gives you, the doors that it opens to allow you to choose, to make conscious choice, to empower yourself, to heal, to go on this journey. If you're not consistent with that, you won't necessarily see any results. If you go to the gym once, that's great for that day, and then you're not going to see any improvement over time. So I think what your conscious empowerment is kind of like the blueprint foundation, and then that conscious empowerment and choice, that married into this house of consistency and really continuing on this journey over and over on a daily basis, for me really encapsulates the whole book. So how to do the work consistently.
Yeah, absolutely. And piggybacking off all of these three concepts now, conscious empowerment and consistency, for me, overwhelmingly, I believe that's what was lacking in the old model and the way that I had been working. In seeing clients week after week, what I was noticing was incredible insight coming from our conscious mind when the human was sitting in front of me, when we have access, right, to the things that did not work for us in the past, many of us able to empower ourselves with the plan, at least, to make new choices in the future. Yet what I consistently came up against in my own life, and I heard from clients, again, week after week, month after month, year after year, is how unable to build that bridge, how unable we pretty generally and universally as humans have increasing insight, yet can't create change. So for me, that's why I'm highlighting, right, the idea of consciousness. We need how to learn to create a habit of living consciously all of the time, and then piggybacking on that, consistently outside of session. Because what I get similarly, like the gym example, like the therapy example, that's 1 hour out of many hours that we're existing in any given week. And what we're all, I think, becoming increasingly aware of, and actually a question that we're gonna present in a few minutes from someone else who called in, talked a little bit about why generally it is difficult to change for us humans. We don't like to go into that unfamiliar territory. So the pull to stay in those ruts is incredibly strong for all of us. So when Jenna's offering the consistent now application of new tools, new thoughts, new behaviors, it has to begin to lay down new habits just as consistently as those old habits were practiced for so many of us. So when we think of now those three words together, right, conscious empowerment through consistency, maybe that is our full, kind of co-created definition. And when we are conscious, again, we gift ourselves with choice. We can learn how to live in alignment, for some of us, with our passions, our purpose, the deeper things within us that we might not be living in alignment toward. And we don't do that, again, when we're operating from that autopilot, because we all know what's there. For many of us, it's those habits and patterns that haven't been serving us. So
I think, too, we all know a lot as humans. You know a lot. I know a lot. We, as a world, know, or at least as a nation know, if we eat less and work out more, we'll lose weight. Yet the majority of the population is still overweight, which shows us that knowing truly makes no difference. It's putting the knowing into action. So I think, Michael, if we were to stretch this from a word or a phrase and just make a complete sentence, really how to do the work is conscious empowerment through consistent action.
Yes, beautiful. So conscious empowerment through consistent action. Again, each and every day we put up the tools on social media, so those of you who are following along have probably heard this language before. And then, of course, contained in the pages of this book are the action plans. What are the steps? Each and every chapter, we talk conceptually. What is the ego? What is the inner child? How do these things show up in our daily life? And at the end of each and every chapter, there is that practical application. There is the how-to. There is how to make this now into a habit, into our lives. So for those of you who have the book, might be working your way through those exercises, but to speak to Jenna's point, it is in action, right? Changing, building the bridge from insight into that conscious, empowered, consistent action where actually change first begins, the seed of change becomes planted, and it blossoms literally into transformation.
I love it. I just got really excited about the book. If you're new to everything that's being said, you're in a perfect place to both learn it, and then when you get to those pages, at the end of a chapter, when you think, oh, this is amazing, I've learned something, now what do I do? You turn the next page, and it really is a very practical application of, well, here's what you just learned, now here's a way to apply it to your life.
And before we dive into the next question, which we're going to do in 1 second, just a note on how to live with the exercises, right? Embed them in your life. Begin to practice them consistently. I often get asked, is there a golden number of how many days, right, I have to do this thing? There's no endpoint, right? Until this becomes an integrated habit, until, for instance, I learn how to live my moments consciously more often than not, that is when we end, right? So it's not really an end point. There's no 30 days, 60 days, check the box and I'm done. It's how long does it take me to integrate this into my now daily habit of being? So for some of us, that means sitting with these exercises. I know for me, as someone who discovered in my own journey of self-healing how unconscious I was living, how strong my autopilot was, I created a habit of consciousness for well beyond 30 days. So for those of you who have been going through the book, that building consciousness, those journal prompts right in the beginning around becoming conscious to ourselves. We are not our thoughts. Everything embodied in that chapter didn't end for me after 30 days. It's a lifelong habit that I'm still practicing. So just a note on how to use the exercises. These are lifelong exercises, which is why we often suggest starting with one area and really becoming good and consistent in that one area before we even build another habit. And again, we're going to dive a little deeper into change and all of that comes up along with change, but I just wanted to make that note before we dive into question number 2.
Which is Monica.
So we have Monica.
Monica. Thank you, Michael, for your question. Thank
Yes.
you, everyone who called in with your questions.
Yes, thank you, everyone. I thank you for saying that, Jenna. We had such an overwhelming response, so many questions. As we often do, we try to be intentional, picking questions that we think will resonate with the most of you out there listening, though there was so many questions, there were even too many to count. So thank you, everyone, who had asked your questions, and know that there'll be many more opportunities to call in to ask questions. It's definitely going to be a part of our podcast coming up. So let me know whenever we're ready, and we'll hear from Monica. All right.
Hi, yes. My name is Monica, and I have a question. I was wondering, how do you deal with, feeling alone in what you're doing? Like, you feel disconnected from others, and, how do you, I don't know, how do you feel more, you get more support from other people? How do you ask for that? And yes, thank you so much.
All right.
Thank you,
Monica. Thank you if you're listening, if you tune into this later. Really great question. We got different versions of this question around loneliness, feeling alone, relational questions, not feeling connected to others. So we thought this was a great kind of representation of something that's coming up for a lot of you, which is, again, not really feeling fulfilled, possibly in our relationships, maybe having that deep feeling of loneliness. So first, we want to answer this, I think, in 2 ways. And the first part of this answer is honoring the reality that many of us feel alone because we don't actually feel connected to the first relationship, our primary relationship in our worlds and our lives, which is the relationship we have with ourselves. Many of us have never, taken time to connect with possibly our physical beings. Maybe for some of us emotionally, we don't allow our emotions presence in our lives. And then there's obviously that deeper, that more essence, spiritual-based sense of self. So many of us have a habit of not tuning in to ourselves. So what happens over time is we become more and more distant from ourselves, more and more disconnected, to the extent that it can begin to present itself as feeling deeply lonely, because we are literally alone in a sense. We aren't even staying in alignment or in connection with the self first. And I wanted to just pause on this part of the answer, because I think logically, a lot of us anticipate the answer to be something outside, right? Finding the right person, finding the person who, to use Monica's language, can be supportive of ourselves or can help us meet our needs. Now, of course, we are interpersonal creatures. We need relationships as humans. However, the most primary relationship begins with ourselves. And many of us kind of overstep that relationship and try to fill our cup, as we say, from the outside in, or using external things, even such as relationships and other people, without really taking the time to connect with ourself first. So reconnecting with ourself, what does that mean? That means honoring the fact that we do have needs. We're all living this human existence in a physical body that has differing, varying needs depending on who we are as individuals. We have different emotional needs, energetic needs. The things that make us feel are quite different than the things that make other people feel. Now again, I believe that we all have a uniqueness or an essence inside that is us, that desires to express. And what a lot of us have done, again, is we've become disconnected from either of those areas of ourselves. We either hear our needs and continuously suppress or deny them, or if you're like me, you've lived life on a spaceship for so long, you have no idea what your needs even are. So honoring that for many of us, this becomes a process of cultivating that authentic connection with the self first. In the book, we devote a whole chapter on the topic of reparenting, which essentially is the process of doing just that, of acknowledging that we all have needs in all of those areas, physical, emotional, and spiritual. And again, it gives us the tools to begin the journey to honor those needs over time. So again, the first step of how do I become less lonely, how do I become more connected with others, is we become more connected with ourself first.
I think what's important to note here too is that relationship to self. While some of you may not even realize that you don't necessarily have a connection or relationship to self, a lot of us do go through life on this autopilot, just living, being, I'm smiling Jenna, and I have some identity over here, not really looking at like the internal mirror of really, well, who am I? If I take away all of everyone else's identity and opinions and projections and ideas of me and my personality or whoever I am, who am I actually to me? And that can be, for the first time, very confronting or very uncomfortable if you've never truly sat to meet yourself, or you've only known yourself through the reflection of eyes of others, or the thought or opinion of others. So I know for me too, this was just on my own journey. It was important to constantly remind myself that the discomfort of meeting myself was a messenger in a way, and a very important door opening and an access for me for much, much deeper healing. It's easy for when something's new, I use the word discomfort a lot, but also really discomfort to me tends to translate into, oh, it's just new. When something's new, it feels very uncomfortable. And my immediate reaction is to just go and run away from it, not realizing at first if I'm not having conscious empowered choice, or I'm not sitting in conscious choice, which again is a practice, I may run away from it. And if I'm able to sit with myself first, sit in that discomfort, maybe even I'm just scheduled an afternoon alone by myself and I'm twiddling my thumbs, I don't know what to do, I feel anxious, I feel uncomfortable, I want to go do something else, but really sitting with and exploring myself, spending time with myself in the same way I would spend time with another person, or if I was watching a little child, how I would engage with them. Like Nicole mentioned in the reparenting chapter in the book, we talk about that, where it's quite literally reparenting little you. So a good way maybe to look at this, if you do struggle with or find discomfort in being alone or meeting yourself, is to imagine, like if I'm hanging out with me, I'm going to imagine little Jenna right next to me and just kind of explore, what do I like doing? What's fun? Do I want to be in nature? I'm usually always called to nature and trees. Do I want to do art, listen to music? Whatever it is, allowing myself, even if it feels uncomfortable, to just sit in that space and those moments with myself, maybe journal, maybe ask myself some questions and just explore, and to really note that anytime I'm feeling that physical ping or hearing that little voice, it's like, go distract, go online, go scroll, go do something else, to kind of have a little light go off that, oh, maybe that's that thing, maybe that's that discomfort where I really do need to practice being alone alone and really increase my tolerance for that discomfort. And I want to just illuminate again here, it's really important to remember that this is a practice. If you're new to spending time with yourself or really afraid even to spend time with yourself, please remember that it is a practice that when done consistently will lead you to the healing that you're embarking on.
Yeah, thank you for that reminder, Jenna, because I think for a lot of us that do feel deeply alone, for some of us alone is the most uncomfortable place to be. I know for me the idea of stopping and being silent or having a couple hours where it was just me at the beginning of my journey, I felt like I wanted to crawl out of my skin, because when I didn't have the external thing to put my attention on, for me, the endless to-do list, or even the other human, what do you want to do, Jenna? How can I service you in this
default to that
moment?
all the time.
Right? And I have to look at me. For me, that was so uncomfortable because I felt it in my body. It feels different for each of us, but for me, it was almost like a visceral agitation. I quite literally felt to be crawling out of my skin, and usually that agitation was matched with racing thoughts. For me, again, all of the other things I should or could be doing, or worrying about what's happening because I'm not doing whatever X, Y, or Z is still happening in the world while I'm alone. So thank you for kind of highlighting that as we begin these new practices for many of us of reparenting, of cultivating an authentic, aligned relationship with ourself, where we acknowledge and honor our needs, for so many of us, that will be uncomfortable. One of my core narratives, so for those of you who are reading along, have probably met this narrative or heard me share it in the book, which is my chorus of narratives is around this idea of being considered, right? So even this topic itself of reparenting, right? To consider one's needs might as well have, right, ticked me off into that uncomfortable. Even looking, right, in the mirror and acknowledging that this being has needs, this being that is me, was my first kind of movement into that unfamiliar space. So up came all the resistances, all of the reasons why I should not be considering my own needs in this moment, and similarly felt incredibly uncomfortable doing so. So thank you for that reminder. Any one of us who are doing any work in the reparenting area to better and more authentically honor our needs probably can anticipate some degree, right, of this discomfort. However, the reason why we're doing this work of reconnecting with the self, once we build that foundation, the second part of this answer is to begin to authentically connect with community, right? To be able to now show up as my full self, as a being who does have needs and who's able to acknowledge and express those needs authentically and safely for those around me, allows me the ability to authentically now connect with other people. Right, so back to Monica's question, which on the surface felt like this was going to be the answer. How do I authentically connect with others? As a reminder, we have to first be in alignment and authentic within ourselves. Before then, I can, again, engage in a new process of authentically connecting with others. It doesn't, for many of us, come naturally. So far more of us are used to wearing masks, assuming roles, playing the helper, the caretaker, the million ways that we show up in relationships, which might not be fully in service of our needs. So the final chapter in the book, very intentionally, once we do the work of healing, what we're doing is building the foundation so that we can stand and embrace our authenticity so that we may then connect with the community around us. The final chapter, entitled Interdependence, is just that. How do I now show up in my authenticity for others to see, to support others, to engage in more truer relationships with others, which is what I believe all of us are intending to do. It just so happens that in that chapter, for those of you who read along, you will meet
me.
The character of Jenna and how our paths first began to cross, of course. But the reason why she was included in that chapter was from, similar to Monica, a very deep sense of loneliness that I was feeling myself, based on, yes, a lack of connection with the self. I had done the work of healing. I'd been reparenting. I did feel like I was beginning to express myself authentically. And I wanted other people. I was starting to actually feel lonely for authentic relationships. And that's, of course, where Jenna and I crossed paths. She was doing her own work of self-healing and expressing herself as a whole individual. And now, of course, we have the opportunity, because it still does take work, for us both to begin to cultivate now together a more authentic relationship?
That chapter gives me chills. The whole story does, really. I love this question, Monica, and I think a lot of us really can resonate with this, because it's, well, where do I begin? How do I meet my own needs? How do I have other people meet my needs? And really, it is such a natural flow, and that relationship with self first truly is the bridge to then being able to connect with others, having that community, having that support. I can't expect Nicole or ask Nicole to meet my needs if I don't yet know what my needs are. So really sitting with myself first, understanding me more, and I think as you really do begin to spend time with you, when you stop looking externally and really start to explore and look internally to who you are, doing the work, using the tools in the book, finding your own true authentic self and self-expression, that naturally will open itself up also just energetically to the people around you. I know that's very much how Nicole came into my orbit, and everyone really who's come onto my path over the last couple of years. Like Nicole said, I'd been on my own self-healing journey much before I even, was shown Nicole's Instagram. And I am very grateful for always having been surrounded by a community of people that saw me as the person that I was stepping into versus the person that's showing up right now or who I was before. And those people didn't just come out of nowhere for me. I very intentionally put people and groups and organizations on my path where I was very intentionally challenging myself and sort of breaking myself open, learning my belief systems, learning my conditioned patterns, looking at like all of my wounds and traumas, and really facing all of the things that I didn't want to face or didn't feel like I wanted to, which really goes back to that discomfort. All of those moments when I was like, I don't want to look at that. I've run far away from everything up until 17-year-old Jenna and beyond. And it was really when I stopped and turned around and said, I'm actually going to stop building. I say this all the time. I felt like I was building a life on a foundation of sand. And I finally stopped doing that, turned around and looked at all of the things that I didn't want to, that made me uncomfortable. I really explored me, and I set myself up through doing that. I was able to express who I was authentically, what my needs were, what does matter to me. And when you do that, the universe really does align you with people who are on a similar vibration, a similar energy, who are on the same path. So naturally, as that happens, when you put one foot in front of the other, you will start to notice people popping up, even in this community. If you're on Instagram right now or on YouTube, you've got thousands of people online with you now in the community, in comments, who are on the journey with you. I know we have our Self-Healer Circle membership where we're consciously creating and intentionally creating a space for us to continue growing and creating that community, because we do understand, like when we started our journeys, it's kind of like, well, where is everyone? Which is the point of doing the work now. The more that you are able to show up, and then the more you're able to kind of take that leap. It is uncomfortable to express yourself vulnerably. It does feel like you're standing naked in front of a crowd sometimes. And when you're able to do that in a safe space, which is the community and the self-healers movement that we're creating and that Nicole has so beautifully ignited in everyone, you'll start to see that you've got other people right alongside you who are on the same path.
What you're highlighting here too, Jenna, is going back in a sense to question one, and how we answer that, right? Even this, the act of connecting with another human, is an action. You said something really, really, astute in the middle of that, which was to get a need met, we have to offer someone the reality that we have a need, right? We have to say something. We have to ask for support. We have to tell someone what's going on for us. People aren't mind readers. And again, for many of us, we do carry that belief into adulthood that people should just know. I've heard a million different iterations of this. If they loved me enough, they would know. If I was important enough, they would know. This idea that people, again, should just know. For many of us, that's a remnant of a time where the adults around us, the caregivers, did appear all-knowing, right? We had a need, we could barely communicate with them, and it did feel to some extent that they just knew. Of course, on a degree of attunement, we all had different caregivers. Though, as we evolve into adulthood, people don't just know. People are living lives from their own vantage point, their own point of view, and reacting to themselves in a way. So it is very difficult for someone to know if it's not spoken. So any of us that have that belief that others should know for whatever reason, if the love was enough, if the care was enough, if I was the right person for them, unfortunately that's just not true. So it is an action, right, of showing up differently now in relationship to possibly ask for support. And this is where I continue to struggle. Being the human who at her core didn't feel considered, right? Showing up in daily service of considering myself is part of my journey. The other half of my journey now is to allow the relationships around me to be supportive to me, for me to experience the benefit of having authentic and aligned individuals. Yet, it is increasingly difficult for me to still do that, to say, hey, Jenna, I have a need. Hey, can you support me, team, or whoever you are, to speak, right, that from that vulnerable place, to speak the need in action is quite difficult. So asking for help, asking for support. If you are someone like Monica, feeling alone, know that the second half of your journey means being vulnerable, asking for help, and then the second part, receiving. Letting someone help you, letting someone, right, take the stress for you, letting someone receive your emotion or hold space, letting yourself receive the help.
And you can try on to, for me, it's saying, like, while it is difficult, also just switching the language of, yes, this is difficult, but why is this difficult? For me, and chances are, I think for many of us, difficult is usually new. It's difficult because we haven't mastered it yet. We don't know it yet. We haven't practiced yet. So even voicing, even just on a daily basis in our communication, I can't expect support from Nicole in a way if I'm not expressing it. She's learning my needs, I'm learning her needs. So there is a flow that happens in relationship to people, but there definitely are times where I think, like, why doesn't this person just know what I need? Why can't they read my mind? And I realize, they don't know me. They don't know my story. They only know the Jenna that presents myself as I speak to them. So it's also that action step that you're speaking of it's crucial here, and that difficulty of speaking up, I maybe would try on saying, like, it's new to speak up. It's uncomfortable for me to speak up. And then also noting, it's uncomfortable again. Well, now I'm back to that uncomfortable feeling. Okay, let's look into this, because chances are this is an opportunity to catapult me. So it's uncomfortable because it's new. If it's new in the direction I'm going, then maybe I should try it on. Try speaking up, because it really does take something inside of you to ask for help, or to ask for support, or to ask for your needs, or even just sharing on social media. I know for me, I used Instagram for the past few years as a diary or a journal, and I would just share my journey along the way, and that's how I expressed outward to people, because if I didn't, there wasn't anyone else that I was speaking to. So really thinking, okay, this is difficult or hard. All right, well, it's just new. It's uncomfortable. So now I'm going to take an actual physical action. I'm going to write someone, I'm going to talk to someone, or I'm going to share something.
Yeah, really, really beautiful teaching to make right here, which is that our language matters. Even the language that we're repeating in our minds matter. Catching yourself when you do say, maybe labeling it discomfort, or when we label it I can't, or notice the words that you're saying to yourself. Obviously noticing the words that you say outwardly, though for a lot of us it's, what is the dialogue? Are we negating this process for ourselves in our minds, or are we using language that might not be as empowering? And in the moments where we can, beginning to practice saying new things to ourselves and expanding from that kind of thought process, that can be incredibly, incredibly helpful. So speaking of discomfort, we have one more question. A question coming in from Debbie, talking a little bit too about the discomfort of change. So when we have Debbie queued up.
Hi, Nicole, this is Debbie, former Philly girl just like you. My question is, I'm 55 years old, and I have been doing your work, and I'm having some struggles with staying on task. So I guess my question is, at 55, these conditions have been so conditioned. Is there a way out? exclamation point. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Debbie.
Yes, thank you, Debbie, fellow Philly girl. I had a big smile when I heard your message. Definitely can't hear your accent, though. I'm told we all have them from us from Philly. So thank you, Debbie. Grab this question because I do see a lot of questions that come up around age, around this idea, is it too late? Also acknowledging how difficult change is. So first and foremost, like I said earlier, change is difficult for all of us humans. However, we can change from birth until now we know death. Our brain, our body is neuroplastic, which means just that. New neurons can begin to fire together and wire together. There was actually a point in time where we didn't know that to be true. We thought that our brain was fixed. We thought that our body was fixed. So very gratefully now, we know that there isn't any expiration date. Once you cross 40 or whatever it is, you're not locked in one way of being, that we do have, our brains are incredible, our bodies are incredible. We can change up throughout life. However, why are most of us stuck in cycles? Why are we unable to change? This is what I was describing earlier that I would see week after week in my clients. The reason why we're stuck lives in the power of our subconscious. Our subconscious, like I said, is evolutionarily wired, and it operates really around one principle: the attempt at keeping ourselves safe. And safety, according to our subconscious, is gained when we go down the familiar paths, when we know what comes next. Because the uncertainty, not knowing what happens next, might invite the threat in that could actually cause our physical demise. Like, again, all of this is very much driven by our evolution. So those imprints, all of the habits and patterns that we began accumulating in childhood, are stored as our autopilot, as that computer program that runs when we're not being conscious. And again, we're geared to stay in that familiar, despite increasing awareness, increasing insight, increasing reasons why not to. According to our subconscious, that is our home. That is our familiar base. And those of us who have tried to change have probably met what I call resistance, right? Again, like I described earlier, that body-based agitation where we're uncomfortable, we feel the energy, we maybe simply just don't feel like ourselves, or for some of us, it comes in the mental world. A million thoughts, a million reasons why not to. Perhaps for Debbie, a million reasons to get off task and to stay off task, right? That's resistance. That's a function of our subconscious's desire, right, to stay in that autopilot to keep us safe, or so it believes. I think it's chapter 2 in the book. We talk about the conscious self and becoming aware. And again, that's why consciousness, like we talked about earlier, is so incredibly important, because our subconscious wants to stay in those ruts, right? Wants to stay repeating those conditions that for some of us do feel imprinted lifelong, like we cannot change. So the first part of this is to honor why so many of us are stuck. We don't actually really want to change. Change is hard as humans, and what comes along with it is incredible discomfort.
In my brain, picture this as, so your subconscious, like you're saying, and Debbie, I don't know how long you've been on this journey of doing the work, but you mentioned that you're 55. So imagine being 55, you've got this perfect computer program in you that is already programmed from birth until now at 55. You do have a default. You have a programmed system of your life that is running nonstop for you. And it takes that, when we say consciousness is important here, consciousness is crucial, because without consciousness, you've just got this perfectly self-sustaining program. There's nothing wrong with it. Your subconscious is perfect. It's doing what it needs to do. It's just going to keep running in this circle on autopilot until you interject something new in. You can't interject anything new in if you do not have or are not practicing consciousness, which is just, while we say, oh, consciousness is important, or we may sound like broken records, consciousness is actually your golden ticket and your only way in to actually rewiring and reprogramming this system that your body has programmed, or your mind has programmed, for the duration of your life. So that consciousness, diving in with that, even just setting an alarm on your phone. I know we mentioned this in the circle. throughout the day where, an alarm goes off, and spending 30 seconds even, just connecting back to your breath, connecting back to the present moment. Something as small as that little ding going off and spending 30 seconds with yourself and your breathing is a way to start to hack into that subconscious programming. Again, there's nothing wrong with it. It's just set in motion, and it's not going to stop unless it's disrupted by something, which is consciousness.
Yeah. So speaking of small, I'm really happy that you used that word, Jenna. We talk a lot about small daily promise, the habit of doing just that, making one small daily promise that you begin to practice keeping to yourself. Not 5 new small daily promises, not changing our life from top to bottom tomorrow, as many of us very understandably want to do, especially when life feels increasingly uncomfortable continuing it as it is. Very logically, we think, okay, well, 5 new things will get me there 5 times quicker, right, to feel better. So honoring, for some of us, what does feel intolerable to continue going as is. However, we want to work with our resistance. We want to understand that our subconscious does get overwhelmed when it begins to tread into that unfamiliar territory. So we want to set ourselves up to succeed, to begin to show alignment between the intention and the action of keeping it. So many of us suffer from what we call here self-betrayal, right? A lifetime for many of us of not keeping our intentions, of not perhaps tying this whole conversation beautifully together, not honoring, not living in alignment within our needs, right? Intending to do a million things and still living in those old habits and patterns. So the way out, we really want to show alignment. We want to show ourselves now consciously that we do keep those promises. So the action of keeping them small, the more smaller, the more maintainable, the more attainable, I should say, our goals are, the better we set ourselves up to do what? Keep the promise consistently. So we'll be the first to suggest to keep those promises small. Debbie out there, feeling like you're getting off track, maybe scaling back, maybe refocusing on a foundation of just one promise that you begin to keep for yourself consistently. Because I know the byproduct of someone like Debbie or any of us living in self-betrayal, we begin to feel very disempowered. We lose all confidence in ourselves to keep our promises, let alone create change, right? I don't even show up for myself in the ways I want to, let alone change and create a life into the future. So we have to begin to rebuild that trust in ourselves. And again, the way we do it is by alignment. It doesn't actually matter. Here's the secret. It doesn't matter what the promise is. If you read the book, and if you were on the live event last week, I think it was, you met Allie, who created an incredible new life for herself around the small daily promise of 1 glass of water. Again, it doesn't matter what the promise is. It's the empowerment that comes behind living the process of keeping those promises. So we want to make the promise and practice keeping it despite the resistance that will be there. And no, Debbie, it is never too late to begin this process.
Debbie, your question made me think of a quote. A friend gave me a journal with this quote written inside of it when I went on one of those, left the U.S. and was gone for months on kind of like a find yourself. I just wrote in a journal and took photos every day for a while. This was years ago. I was very grateful to do it. But the journal, the point of this, the quote inside, if I butcher it, I apologize. I think it's Gino Diaz, and he says, "If these years have taught me anything, it is this: the only way out is in." And it really strikes me because in your question, Debbie, you end it with, is there a way out? And immediately when I heard that, it just pinged that quote that was that trip. The whole point was, when the friend gifted me that journal, they could very wisely tell that, I was searching for something. I was on this very external pull, when the thing that I really needed, hence why it was in a journal too, was really to go in and really to spend time, like wrapping back to Monica's question and to Michael's, to spend time consistently going inward and meeting myself. So when we're talking about this consistency and this small daily promise, it also circles back perfectly to chapter 11, reparenting. So Debbie, on this journey, I feel stuck, or is there a way out? What do I do? How do I stay on track? It's just doing that thing again and again and again. We tell our circle members consistently, we'll give you prompts in your course each month, and if you set to do it for X amount of days or every day and you miss a day, that's completely fine. The important part is to then pick it back up again the next day. If you miss the next day, that's also okay. Go again the next day and the next day, and eventually you do start to build that momentum where it begins to carry itself a little bit lighter.
Yeah, really, really great reminder there too, Jenna, because when that confidence comes, you don't fear, right, falling off your habits anymore, right? I've gotten to the place for me where there are mornings where, I don't do all of the things that I know help me stay grounded and balanced. However, I've consistently done all the things enough, not done them, resumed doing them, that now I know that I now reframe it as it's a break, right? I might not be doing whatever particular action or daily, choice it is in this moment, though I have that confidence. That's what I was describing earlier. I no longer fear taking time off or honoring a moment or a morning or a day where I don't have the resources, right, to do the things that I should be doing. That's a byproduct actually of not staying committed to our habits from the beginning. In the beginning, there were many mornings where I didn't do all of the things, and I keep saying morning just for those of you listening, because the morning is the time where I can, for me, carve out time in my day to do all of the things that I know are helpful to me. In the beginning, there were many mornings where I did not do them consistently. Committing to that practice the next morning I had available to me helped me build that confidence. So now I'll be the first to admit, especially when things get busy, I tend to, shave things off of my morning routine that otherwise would be helpful to me. I no longer fear that spiral, right? I don't longer fear going back to that past self and living in all of those older habits. I know for me, that new choice to resume is right around the corner. So I love that reminder that there actually can be some value when we miss our habits or when we don't keep our promises in the beginning, continuing to remind yourself that each new moment, each new day, each new morning, wherever it is that you make those choices, is a new opportunity to actualize that promise to yourself yet again.
And I'm remembering here too, when you're speaking on, if you've heard Nicole speak a lot before about neuroplasticity, I think this is important to remember when you start to get into that stuck again, or Debbie, you mentioned, being 55 or however old anyone is, thinking, oh, it's too late, or I started too late. Remember in that moment that this perfect subconscious programming, this computer system that you already are, at any given moment you could be 95 and you do still have neuroplasticity where you are able to interject this consciousness and actually start to create newly and create a conscious life and a conscious practice. So also just remember that your brain actually is something that's malleable and can change at any given time when you choose to.
Yeah, such a beautiful reminder. I think a brilliant point to end on, which is that we are all capable of so much within that basis of consciousness, right? Empowering each of ourselves with choice. Within that choice, we can begin to honor authentically what our needs are and show up in full self-expression so that we can be more intimately and authentically connected with those around us. All of this is possible. Wellness is possible, in our opinion, at any age. If you begin, right, to create a new habit of consciously doing the work to create that change. We all have that autopilot. Right now, we can all gift ourselves with empowerment, with choice, with, for many of us, a new say for the first time in our lives where we get to show up as the being who considers, who tends to, and who acknowledges ourselves, for some of us, for the first time ever. So for those of you who already have the book and are working your way through it, like I said at the beginning, this is a living, breathing, practice. I've already seen so many of you, going through it multiple times, pausing on chapters. I saw many of you acknowledging how difficult some of this content is, reading the chapters, having a lot of feelings coming up, knowing that all of this is part of the journey of healing. Hit pause if you're one of those people. If reading the chapters is bringing up some of the deeper wounding, right? Pausing there, tending to it, honoring whatever it is that is coming up for you. There's no time limit on healing. There's no linear, right, trajectory of healing. And again, the work of healing is finding that safety, finding those people, finding the Jenna, finding the community. For many of us, that is part of the journey. Finding the spaces where we can begin to experiment with these new ways of being. That's what the work is, beginning to practice something that is new, that is scary because it's new, and that is challenging because it's new. Though knowing on the other side of this newness, for so many of us can come such incredible transformation. So I'm not sure if you have any parting words before we wrap this up here today.
I would just end with, you cannot rush your healing. It will not and cannot be rushed. And there also isn't like a golden pot, a pot of gold on the other side of a rainbow somewhere. We were talking the other day, and this visual came to mind of really, when we're embarking on a healing journey, I picture it like a road. And immediately, past Jenna, old Jenna, would go to thinking, okay, well, there's this perfect like healing path that I've got to go on. It has an end to it. I've got to find this right path. That doesn't exist. So if you're seeing a path with all of these things along the way, that's not necessarily how it's going to turn out. You can understand and should be able to visualize or practice visualizing where you're going, who you want to be, who you truly are, and then also surrender to the fact that you can hold that vision and not necessarily have the details of how you're going to get there. So this visual I have of this path, I quickly realized in our conversation the other day that while the path doesn't exactly exist, the way the path is actually created is by taking a single step. So quite literally, if you look down at your feet, imagine taking one step forward and a brick forming under it, taking another step forward and a brick forming under it. You're creating your own unique path as you go, and you're doing it through conscious action. So using the tools in the book. Also at the back of the book, there's a holistic psychology term glossary. So any of the things that we're talking about here too, or if any words come up, we haven't referenced that much. At the back of the book, you can go to it. You can see like neuroplasticity is in there. It'll explain a bit. That was just a side note. So as you're going, just also remember you're creating the path as you go. It's not to be rushed, but it does take this conscious, empowered, consistent action. I think action is the key takeaway here, that it is a doing. It's how to do the work.
Yeah, but know, everyone out there listening, that there are so many people walking this journey of healing right alongside of you. You know, obviously different histories, different stories, though sharing, I think, that universal experience of change, and all of that comes along with it. So know that there are, if you are, you know, someone like Monica, feeling disconnected, feeling lonely, looking for your people, again, know that they are out there. Come visit us on Instagram and meet all of the other self-healers from around the world that are also walking their journeys of healing. Those of you that are in the self-healer circle, know that that's a great community to begin to tap into, though know that there have to be actions, right? Reaching out, connecting with these people, asking for support, acknowledging the moments where we need support is how we can begin to show up for ourselves as we continue our journeys of healing. As always, it is my honor to be walking this journey alongside everyone here, all of you out there listening. As I mentioned earlier, in the next week or so, we're going to be releasing the first episode of our How to Do the Work Masterclass. So you've not heard the end of us on all things of this book. So anyone who is interested in continuing along this journey can join us for the Self-Healer Soundboard, How to Do the Work Masterclass, where we'll be diving in again chapter by chapter, talking about the content, and also, like we did today, taking live questions. So anyone who has some questions on any chapter, begin to note them down, and as we move forward, we will be letting everyone know how to access that call-in number so that you can begin to deposit your questions there, and perhaps next time one of your questions will be answered live.
If you do not yet have the book too, it is available at all international book retailers. So please search online. You can also look in the link in the Holistic Psychologist profile. We'll give you a few. And we've referenced the Self-Healer Circle quite a few times in our community there. If you would like to join the circle in the future, we now have a new process for that where it will be directly from the waitlist. So you can also head to theholisticpsychologist.com and join the waitlist for the Self-Healer Circle and join a growing community too of support and others doing the work.
Absolutely. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you, Jenna, for joining me here
Nicole.
today. Like I said, you're going to hear a lot more about Jenna from Jenna. She'll be co-hosting the new Self-Healer Soundboard, so super excited for you to get to know her a bit more. She's definitely been an integral part of my own healing journey, so thank you for everything here and outside of here that you do. And as always, sending love to your corner of the world, wherever you're joining us. There also is those of you who are on Instagram might have seen already, before we end here, the new How to Do the Work Instagram page, so anyone interested in following that journey along, posting content from the book, and of course other people as they're traveling along in their journeys. So How to Do the Work on Instagram, you can follow along there as well. Sending love to each and every one of you.
Thank you. Thanks for going.